All right, so this video exists because of an embarrassing discovery that I made about 2 hours ago. So I was writing today's Tudor Minute. It was about the Battle of Dussindale, however you say it, fought 477 years ago today on the 27th of August, 1549. When I finished it, I went to go in to add a related video to my big Kett's Rebellion video because obviously I've done one. Kett's Rebellion is huge. I've been doing this podcast since 2009. I mention Robert Kett constantly. I bring him up at TudorCon. I have opinions about Robert Kett. Surely I've done a big video on Robert Kett. So I went in to go add related video. Boom, no video. 17 years. And I've never actually sat down and told you the story of Kett's Rebellion properly. So we are fixing that today. Hey friend, welcome back to the Renaissance English History Podcast. I am your host, Heather. Like I said, I've been podcasting with this show since 2009, which makes me the original Tudor history podcaster, though I never actually talked about Robert Kett before in a full video episode. Anyway, I am, as always, delighted that you are here with me today to talk about Kett's Rebellion, a rebellion over Protestantism and land enclosures and all kinds of stuff, and possibly one of the best historical fiction books ever is based around Kett's Rebellion. But we're going to talk about that in a minute. All right, before I start, a quick thing. We crossed 100,000 subscribers this week. 100,000 of you. I still make these videos in a room by myself talking to my laptop, so that number does not compute for me at all. Well, my dog's over there. She listens to me talk. But anyway, the number, 100,000, that's makes my brain hurt. But I am so very grateful for it. I kind of can't believe that there's 100,000 of you that want to nerd out on Tudor history with me. I don't know what to say except for thank you. So thank you. If you are new here and you like this sort of thing, there is a subscribe button somewhere down here, maybe down, I don't know, somewhere. It would be amazing if you would subscribe as well so you don't miss the next one. All right, Norfolk, 1549. England in 1549 was a hot mess. Henry VIII has been dead for 2 years. On the throne is Edward VI, who is 11. Running the country is Edward's uncle, Edward Seymour, Duke of Somerset, who has given himself the title of Lord Protector, which is exactly as subtle as it sounds. The big economic story of the moment is sheep. I know, stay with me. This part actually really matters. For decades, landlords have been fencing off common land, the shared pasture where ordinary villagers grazed their animals, and they've been converting it to sheep runs because wool made a lot of money and tenant farmers did not. In Norfolk, there was also a system called fold course, where the lords of the manor had the right to run his flocks across his tenants' land. His sheep's, their crops, great for him, not so great for them. So people are angry. Fine. People in the 16th century are frequently angry. People today are frequently angry. But here's what makes 1549 different. Somerset had issued proclamations against illegal enclosure and had set up commissions to investigate it. He had actually been making noises about it being a real problem. And the message that ordinary people took from that was, hey, cool, the government agrees with us. So sit with that for a minute because it is the key to everything that follows. The people who tore down the fences did not think that they were rebelling. They thought that they were doing the king's work and that the king was going to say thank you for it. So now we have the village feast that got out of hand. The weekend of the 6th of July, 1549, Windermere, Norfolk, about 10 miles from Norwich. There's the annual feast with a play of honor of Thomas Becket, co-patron of Windermere Abbey, which is notable on its own because Henry VIII, of course, had ordered Becket's name struck out of the church calendar 11 years before. Windermere just sort of kept doing it anyway, and I love that for them. Monday the 8th. The feast is over. A crowd, in the mood that you get after a weekend of drinking and revelry and pageantry, walks out to Morley St. Botolph and Heatherset, which is a great name, and starts pulling down hedges and fences. One of the first targets is a man called John Flowerdew. He's a lawyer and a landowner who is deeply unpopular for his part in overseeing the demolition of Windermere Abbey. And Flowerdew, being a lawyer and therefore a problem solver, bribes the crowd to leave his fences alone and go bother his neighbor instead. He paid a mob to attack the guy he had had a feud with. That is the actual origin of one of the largest uprisings in Tudor England, a grudge and a bribe. So, the crowd walks over to Robert Kett's place. Kett's about 57 at this point. He's a tanner and a landowner, one of the wealthier men in Windermere. He is exactly the sort of person that they are protesting against. He has also been feuding with Flowerdew for years because when the abbey was pulled down, Kett was one of the parishioners who fought to save the parish church. So, Kett says, I'm going to listen to you. And he listens. And then he says, you know what? You guys are right. And he steps across his fence and he helps them to tear down all of his own fences. And then he takes the whole crowd back to Heatherset and they pull down Flowerdew's fences after all. Flowerdew paid the bribe and he lost his fences anyway, which is the most satisfying detail in this entire story. And then Kett tells them that if they will take him as their leader, he will go with them and see all of the abuses put to right. I have read a lot of Tudor sources, and there is nothing quite like that. A man agrees with the argument against his own interest and then walks out of his own front gate to lead it. So they set up camp on Mousehold Heath. So the next morning, they set off for Norwich. They pick up people from every village as they pass. The city won't let them march through, so they go around. And on Friday, the 12th of July, they reach Mousehold Heath, the high ground northeast of the city. They stay there for the next 6.5 weeks. And then they do the thing that makes this different from every other rebellion. They start to govern. Kett actually sets up headquarters in the ruins of St. Michael's Chapel, which people still to this day call Kett's Castle. He forms a council with representatives from the hundreds of Norfolk and one from Suffolk, and they meet under an oak tree that they name the Oak of Reformation. The council issues warrants to obtain provisions and arms and to arrest members of the gentry. Prisoners get held in an empty mansion up the hill. Services are held in the open air using the brand new Book of Common Prayer. And the camp keeps growing until it is actually bigger than Norwich. Norwich was the second largest city in England at this time, about 12,000 people. And the camp on the hill got bigger than that. A settlement of 16,000 people with a court, a supply chain, a chaplaincy, and a paperwork problem. That is not a mob, my friend. That is a county administration that the county did not authorize. So, Somerset sends preachers up to talk them down. One of them is Matthew Parker, who will one day be Elizabeth's Archbishop of Canterbury. He stands under the Oak of Reformation and tells them not to trample the crops, not to shed blood, not to distrust the king. And it goes so badly that the story afterwards is that he escaped only by someone tactfully starting up a Te Deum. You just sing your way out of it, which I also kind of love. Worth saying here is that almost everything we know about this comes from people who hated Kett's rebellion. Our two main narrative sources are both hostile. One of them was written by Parker's own secretary. So when the rebels come across as menacing, remember that they're not the ones telling the story. The people who hated them are the ones telling the story. So we have to keep that in mind. So what did these rebels actually want? Well, they drew up 29 articles and sent them to Somerset, signed by Kett, by the mayor of Norwich, by a former mayor, and by the 100 representatives. The sitting mayor of Norwich signed the rebel petition. Think about that for a second. And the articles are actually worth reading. I'll link to them in a pinned comment because they demolish the idea that this was mindless violence. They're specific and procedural, and mostly they aren't even about enclosure. Lords should not graze their own animals on the commons. Rents and land prices should go back to what they were in the first year of Henry VII. Officials who take bribes should answer for it. Priests should stop buying up land and should teach the poor children of the parish their catechism. And then there's Article 16. They ask that all bondmen be made free, for God made all free with his precious bloodshedding. There are two readings of that, and they're both remarkable. One is they meant the actual remaining serfs in England, a lot of whom were on estates in that part of Norfolk. The other is that they were protesting the 1547 Vagrancy Act, which made it legal to enslave a servant who didn't find a new master within 3 days. Remember, we talked about those poor laws a couple of weeks ago? England had a law like that. Again, I'll link to that episode. We just did it like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Anyway, England had a law like that. It was legal to enslave a servant who couldn't find a master. It was a 2-year-old law. People hated it. So that's a Norfolk farmer in 1549 arguing against slavery on the grounds of the crucifixion. Quick pause here, because this is exactly the kind of nerding out thing that we do at TudorCon. And this Saturday, the 29th, we are running a free online thing called the Taste of TudorCon, where we'll have some of this year's speakers. Each of them have recorded a chunk of their talk, and they will go live one after another, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern for about 2 hours. We're going to talk about Henry VIII and his head trauma, and John Dee, and the history of the English language, a dress that took 7 years to make. It's free. It's a taste for you to see whether you would like to come to this year's TudorCon, which is in October. You can come online or in person. If you can't make it live, there's a replay page. You can drop in and out. The links are in the description or up there. So just come on Saturday and hang out. All right. So all of that takes us to the Battle of Dussindale. On the 21st of July, a herald arrives from London, proclaiming the whole thing a rebellion, and he offers everybody a pardon. And Kett refuses it. He says he has committed no treason, and therefore he needs no pardon. That single sentence is the whole man. The next day, the rebels swim to the river under a hail of arrows, and they take Norwich. The government sends the Marquess of Northampton with about 1,400 men, including Italian and German mercenaries. And here is the thing that nobody expects. The farmers actually win. There's brutal street fighting in and around Tombland at the start of August. And Lord Sheffield goes down when he falls off of his horse into a ditch. Expecting to be captured and ransomed like a gentleman, he takes off his helmet to show his face, and a rebel kills him with a single blow. This rebel was reportedly a butcher, so that's fitting. That gesture is the entire class system in about 4 seconds. So the government sends the Earl of Warwick with something between 12 and 14,000 men. And on the 26th of August, 1,400 German Landsknechts march into the city to join him, professional soldiers with artillery. Kett brings his people down off the high ground to fight in the open at Dussindale, and on the 27th of August, 477 years ago today, about 3,000 of them are killed. Warwick loses about 250 himself. Kett is caught the following night at Swannington, tried for treason in London, and on the 7th of December, he is hanged in chains from the walls of Norwich Castle. That same day, his older brother William is also hanged from the West Tower of Windermere Abbey, the church that he had helped to save. Somerset actually fell from power that October, partly for being seen as too soft on the Commons. Warwick took over and became the Duke of Northumberland, and if that name is ringing a bell, yes, he is the one who tries to put Lady Jane Grey on the throne 4 years later. In 1550, the city of Norwich made the 27th of August an annual public holiday to celebrate its deliverance from Kett, and paid for sermons in the churches on the sins of rebellion. They actually kept that up for over a century. In 1949, the same city put a plaque on the castle wall where his body had been hung. It called him a courageous leader in the long struggle of the common people of England to escape a servile life, and it says that it was placed there in reparation. It was proposed by a former mayor of Norwich named Fred Henderson, who had himself been locked up in that castle for his part in the food riots of 1885. The man who got Kett his memorial had done time in the same building for the same kind of thing 400 years apart. So if you want to actually really dig deep in this and live inside it, you should read Tombland by C.J. Sampson. 7th Matthew Shardlake novel. It came out in like 2018. 880 pages. Matthew Shardlake ends up in Norwich in the summer of 1549, and he gets swept into the camp on Mousehold Heath. And it is the best historical fiction about Kett's rebellion by a wide margin. It isn't even close. It's one of the best historical fiction ever. Sampson clearly loved these people. He put a really long essay at the back called Reimagining Kett's Rebellion, walking through the real history, which tells you just how seriously he took getting it right. C.J. Sampson actually died in 2024 with an 8th book barely started. So this is where Shard Lake, unfortunately, will be leaving us. I do think it's his best. So if you want to learn more about Kett's Rebellion, you should read Tombland. Clear your weekend, just finish it. You'll be fine. It's all good. All right, so that's Kett, a man who was told his own fences were the problem, agreed, and then spent 7 weeks running Norfolk from a field. 2 things before you go. Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern, The Taste of TudorCon, free, link below. And if this is your kind of story, hit subscribe because there are 100,000 of us doing this right now, which is amazing. I still can't quite get over that. Also, if you enjoyed this video, I sure would appreciate to press that like button. It helps feed that algorithm and get our content to more people. Thank you for hanging out with me, spending this time with me talking about Kett's Rebellion. Remember, you are deeply loved. I'm so glad I shared the planet with you. You make the world a better place, and I'm grateful we got to spend this time together today. I will be back very, very soon. In the meantime, don't forget to drink your water. Bye-bye, friend.